One fishy scene of season 1 of From for me was when Ethan saw the boy in white for the first time outside the windows of Colony House. My immediate expression was, wait, are they twins? Because he bore such a striking resemblance to Ethan in a way that initially made me wonder whether they were brothers or they shared some sort of relation. My suspicions couldn't have been more accurate when Victor revealed his plight, explaining how the boy in white left him for dead after decades of friendship, only to reappear when the Matthews family arrived, which implied that Ethan and the boy in white were probably related in more ways beyond my prior understanding. And after researching through a lot of theories on the internet, I don't think I was wrong at all. In one of the most compelling and highly debated fan theories within the From community, there is a massive amount of narrative evidence supporting the idea that the boy in white is the son of Jade and Tabitha's original incarnations from a past cycle. The show heavily implies that Fromville operates in a continuous, multi-generational loop where current residents are reincarnations or mirrors of past ones. Within that framework, this theory could fit perfectly due to several key clues I want us to explore in this video. Now, before we dive into this theory, I want us to take a second to consider who the boy in white actually is, and how that could point to him being Tabitha and Jade's son from a past life. The boy in white was actually the very first child to appear in visions to the residents of Fromville. His appearances go all the way back to a young Victor 40 years ago, before he started showing up to Ethan, Boyd, and Sarah in the first season. Played by Vox Smith, his presence has gradually expanded to characters like Tabitha, yet the townspeople still don't know if he is truly a goodly force or some secret sinister. His shocking interaction with Tabitha at the end of Season 2 changed everything. Tabitha goes to the lighthouse hoping to save the children in her visions, only to run into the boy in white. And for the first time ever, he actually spoke, telling her he is sorry and that this was the only way, right before he shoved her out of the glass window. Now, while that looked like a malicious act on the surface, the fact that Tabitha immediately woke up in a Camden hospital completely changed his implied purpose. So instead of being a threat, he seems to be a guardian angel for those trapped in Fromville. He strategically shows himself to people who are desperate enough to need help, but innocent enough to accept it. Someone like Jim would instantly reject his personality, albeit uncanny, but appeal to characters like Ethan and Victor, who possess a childhood innocence that makes them receptive. Sarah is already wired into the frequency of the town. Boyd is desperate for answers, and Tabitha was already tracking the mystery of the children at the lighthouse. So it will make sense to say he only reveals himself to the people who can actually handle his guidance. Moreover, he appears at the exact moments these people have the best chance of uncovering the mysteries of the town. While the show obviously wants audiences to be skeptical of a silent boy dressed in pristine white, his actions suggest he is a spirit fighting back against the forest's evil nature. Tabitha finding him atop the lighthouse implies he might literally be the lighthouse keeper, some ancient entity, or a spirit guide looking for ways to rescue people, not only from the night monsters, but from everything this place has become. If you look at his past actions, he has only ever saved people. When the entire town died during Victor's childhood, the boy in white stayed with him so he wouldn't be lonely. When Boyd and Sarah were about to be swallowed by the dark forest, he guided them straight to a faraway tree. And when he pushed Tabitha out of that window, it was the exact catalyst that sent her back to the real world to discover Miranda's past and set her on the path of remembrance. It is true that his brief appearances keep his true intentions ambiguous, but we know that he always steps in when things become critical, and in every instance, it is for the betterment of the townspeople. Heading into Season 3, the biggest mystery was his actual identity, even though it still is. We certainly can't tell what his name is, his backstory, or if he was ever even human, except the fact that he does look human. Before then, he hadn't aged a single day in 40 years, which clearly implies a spirit being who is tied to the forest in more ways than we know. And only started changing when the forest began changing as well. He might have died in Fromville in the distant past, remaining behind as a ghost, more or less like the Ankui children, attempting to save new residents from suffering the same fate as he did. Since the creative minds behind From were the ones who also produced the Lost series, it is highly likely his role mirrors Jacob, the ageless protector of the island. In which case, just like Jacob searched for a successor among the survivors, the boy in white might be scouting for his own youthful successor in Ethan, or previously in Victor. If he's the embodiment of light in this town associated with the lighthouse, then the dark force or voice Sarah calls, it may be his dark counterpart. A counterpart that took a liking to impersonating the identity of Thomas, Ethan's lost brother, to tease the Matthews family over the radio. Needless to say, this same dark entity is Sophia or the man in yellow, but this would mean both the boy in white and his evil foil were likely born in Fromville centuries ago to specific parents. So, looking at it from a comparative perspective, it wouldn't take a genius to know his evil counterpart is the one responsible for all the mayhem this place has caused. And that idea stems from a foundational principle that cuts across many religious circles. A principle that suggests the idea that light alone cannot exist, except there be some balance from a dark existential, at least in this world. And once you come to that realization, Thomas's dark impersonation on the radio, both to Jim first and later to Ethan, sounds a bit more concerning than it was made to appear. The first clue supporting the theory of the boy in white being Jade and Tabitha's son is the hint of a missing eighth child. When Jade investigates the ritualistic altar stones, he confirms that 7 children were sacrificed. However, ancient drawings found throughout the town explicitly depict 8 children, meaning 1 child was missing. The theory suggests that the boy in white is that 8th child, the son of the original Jade and Tabitha, who somehow escaped the slaughter. Because his parents refused to sacrifice him, he wasn't trapped like the Ankui children. Instead, he became a wandering spirit trying to fix the town's cycle. Secondly, the family dynamics between the cycles also align perfectly. For the past cycle, Miranda, the past Tabitha, arrived in town with a boy, Victor, and a girl, Eloise. Christopher, the past Jade, was also present at the time. And for the present cycle, Tabitha arrives in town with a boy, Ethan, and a girl, Julie, while Jade arrives separately. Because Victor and Ethan are effectively structural brothers across different lifetimes, it explains why the boy in white has a deep, comforting affinity specifically for them. Thirdly, Victor remembers a massive argument in flashbacks between Christopher and the boy in white, where Christopher was furious and refused to listen to him. So the theory suggests Christopher's intense anger stems from the boy in white revealing his true identity, that he was Christopher's own son from a previous cycle, a truth Christopher simply could not comprehend or accept, which later changed his funny personality into one that eventually ended with the previous cycle. If the boy in white is their son, it immediately explains his motivations. The fact that he is not some all-powerful god or behave like the monsters, that he is a trapped soul trying to guide his parents, Jade and Tabitha, to finally solve the puzzle so their spirits can break the curse and move on. The foundational truth of this idea begins with the massive revelations that Tabitha and Jade uncovered during the 3rd season. In the Season 3 finale, it is revealed that these 2 individuals aren't just accidental strangers caught up in a random nightmare. Thus, The climax of the season uncovers a deeper reality. Their spirits have inhabited this cursed place in previous life cycles, taking on the identities of Miranda and Christopher in the past, and stretching back even further to the original bargain involving the sacrificed children. Furthermore, the narrative exposes the true meaning behind the word onkui, revealing that it actually translates to remember. But that is precisely where the existence of Jade and Tabitha's daughter is mentioned. Tabitha openly confesses that she and Jade once shared a life that brought a little girl into the world, and that when they first tried to save her from being sacrificed together with the Ankui children, they failed. At first glance, this revelation appears to completely dismantle the idea that the boy in white could be their offspring too. If the narrative has explicitly established that their lost little one was a girl, it seems impossible for the boy in white to also be their biological child from that past life. However, this apparent contradiction is exactly what makes the theory far more compelling. Because Tabitha's mind isn't functioning like a perfectly intact archive of memories that opens up cleanly all at once. Instead, she keeps getting fragments of her past lives through pure terror, vivid hallucinations, and psychological trauma. So, citing a daughter only does not necessarily mean that she was the only child she and Jade ever brought into this world. That specific detail changes everything. The little girl represents the ultimate tragedy, the child they were entirely helpless to protect from the sacrifice. On the flip side, the boy in white might represent the other side of that same coin, a second child whom they actually managed to rescue, at least in some spiritual, incomplete form, from sharing his sister's horrific fate, just like how Victor survived the massacre and Eloise didn't. This would immediately clarify one of the greatest visual contrasts present throughout the entire series. The Ankui children appear physically damaged while the boy in white appears, well, in white. A single glance at their decadence, especially their hair, not only paints the idea that they endured an unspeakable horror, but that they were killed and buried. In stark contrast, the boy in white presents himself as completely immaculate. He appears entirely unblemished, looking almost perfectly embalmed. He is dressed in white clothes, remains completely isolated from the surrounding rot, and projects an unnatural tranquility that the Ankui children completely lack. That fundamental distinction strongly implies that he managed to avoid being offered up to the darkness. If that is how events unfolded, the boy in white would have avoided ending up like one of those children, because the original sacrifice never actually devoured his essence. However, because the sacrifice was still carried out, and because his relatives still remained chained to its consequences, he was permanently bound to the town. In truth, he didn't die the way the other victims did, yet he was never liberated either. So he continues to exist like a wandering spirit. If subsequent episodes of the show confirm that Tabitha and Jade only ever brought a single child into the world, then this theory will have no grounds to stand. In that case, the boy in white would merely be a manifestation of a collective hope that has become part of the forest, or a product of some other phenomenon we aren't privy to at this point. However, if the show later reveals otherwise, then this theory could stand as the better explanation for why the boy in white behaves and appears so entirely distinct from the other supernatural entities of the town. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Catch you in the next one.